A lot of Cody Bellinger talk this week. We're going to get into that. The future of the Cubs moving into spring training, which starts next week. Yeah, we're going to talk about that as well. Everything you need to know about the Cubs the week before spring training. Well, really, it feels like the night before Christmas. Let's talk about it right here on the Cubs Baseball channel. It's time for Friendly Confines Weekly. Let's get this thing started. Peace, everybody. Welcome to the Cubs Baseball channel. It's time for Friendly Confines Weekly. That's where we talk about everything going on or that has gone on in the week of the Chicago Cubs. With the catfish himself, Chad Anderson, I'm Mick Gillispie at This Chad Is Real, at Broadcaster Mick on the socials. What is going on, man? The people were wondering where you been.
Man, I wish I was you, traveling all over the Southeast and trips here and the beach and the warm weather and the sunshine. And you went to spring training early, Mick. That's what happened is you took an early spring training trip.
Yeah, and I'm going back again, too. I'll be there. We got a ring ceremony on the 8th, and I'm leaving be there probably the 6th or the 7th and probably leave the 10th or the 11th. So may see some of you guys out there.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm excited, man. I mean, it's here. I mean, we've waited and now it's here. I mean, well, a week away, but
that's here.
Been,
that's close enough. Close enough.
Oh yeah, man. It's been such a ride, and I got to say this too. People I know are so sick and tired of talking about Cody Bellinger, Scott Boras, and Jed Hoyer. And also you can throw Carter Hawkins in there as well. And I know that some of you guys are like, hey, I would love it to talk about some other stuff. But the problem is, Chad, is that it's such a big part of what's going on right now. If not the biggest, he was the best player on the team. And
Right.
We don't know what's going to happen. But the Cubs are going to be an entirely different team if they don't make that deal. But at the same time, I don't blame them for wanting a good deal and not to get run over by Scott Boras.
Yeah, I mean, it's I tell you what, the Cubs, man, there's some amazing discipline and the willpower and the ability to not let outside factors interfere and impulse their decisions. Like think about it. The fan base, if you're a Cubs fan, right, which we are, and I don't work for the Cubs, but if you're a Cubs fan, you're looking at this offseason and you're just kind of like, Craig Counsell's great. Imanaga, it's a good signing. Another piece here or there, Hector Neris, some of those guys, whatever. But it's been kind of underwhelming, right? Based on what the expectations were. So, yeah, I mean, if you're a Cubs fan, you're just like, Jesus Christ, just sign the guy. But the Cubs front office, and this is a fine line to walk when you're the front office, because if you hold out and you hold out and you hold out, and almost the front office is in I don't want to say a completely lose-lose situation, but you know what I mean here? Like if they sign Bellinger, the reaction will be excitement, but it'll also be like, finally,
Right.
like finally got somebody.
Yeah.
But if you don't sign Bellinger, then it's egg on your face, and your best signing in the offseason's Imanaga, which he's great. He's a good addition to the rotation, but he's not the splash. He's not Ohtani. He's not Soto. He's not Bellinger. He's not Jordan Montgomery, Blake Snell, Josh Hader. Like he's not any of those guys. So, and Yamamoto, I keep forgetting about him. But the Cubs are in that situation where the front office, man, like I feel like Cubs fans are, like you said, they're exhausted from even thinking about it. It's like, just get on with it already. But it's a dangerous line for the front office to be walking, but kudos to them at the same time for having the stones to wait this long and hold out the way they're doing.
Yeah, I talked about this yesterday. Jeff Passan said on ESPN 1000. By the way, ESPN 1000 has had a killer week as far as conversations about Bellinger from people who are insiders. Jesse Rogers, a couple of days, well, day before this, said 51-49, the Cubs sign him, right? See, feels like it's pretty even, maybe slightly better, but Cubs have a track record of not working with Scott Boras. And so he kind of felt like that was why, right? And then Passan said that. I don't think that it was basically, this is his quote about desperation, like that the Blue Jays are the desperate team that they'll go with this 7 or 8 year contract for $200 million for Bellinger. My thoughts are this. The thing that irritates a lot of baseball fans about Scott Boras is he knows that Cody Bellinger isn't going to be worth that type of money after 5 years, maybe not even 5 years, right?
Right. Yep.
In a realistic market,
Was he 28, 29?
28, but I mean, just look at the way that things work in baseball. I mean, you get hurt, and some guys are great up until they're 40 and they're called Hall of Famers, right? I mean, but most players, like something happens and, and their curve starts to go this way, right? So he knows like 7 or 8 years from now, there's a chance that Bellinger's only on the roster because you're paying him to be there, not because he's good enough to be there anymore. That's why no one in business would want to pay this. So you basically in the past, they've done that just because that will make a team, a team will do that even though they know it's a bad deal because they're saying, well, at least we'll have them for 4 years, or 5 years. But now that these TV contracts are in all this trouble, there's less money out there. It's a lot more of a risk to pay a guy 7 or 8 years, and the Cubs don't want to get into a Hayward situation.
Yep.
And I think that that's where the rub is, and that was kind of what Passan was saying. Cubs don't want to go 7 or 8 years. I think they would go 5 years. They'd go 7 or 8 with club options, right? Where you're like, hey, you know what? We'll pay you that 30 mil if you're worth it, 25 million if you're worth it still. But we have the option to back out. But they're not going to give them that. And the Cubs have made deals this offseason, including Imanaga, where they have done that. They've got options in there, so it protects the team.
But that's what Boras and these guys are doing, right? Like on the flip side, they also know they're not worth that much money in 8 years. And that's why they're doing it. You're basically, and a lot of contracts are even set up or structured this way, or when you start talking about the actual value of a Major League Baseball player and what you're paying someone. Like if you give somebody $200 million for 8 years, right? That comes out to $25 million a year if you spread it evenly. The problem with that calculation is that the production's not even. The production's not equal. You can't assume a 30-year-old is going to be the same player at 35 and 36 years old. What's the prime now? 27 to 32, 27 to 31, somewhere in there. So Cody, assuming, follows trends, is kind of right on the upswing of his prime. So great time to get the guy. But what you're doing on these contracts, and kind of like the Cubs unfortunately did with Hayward, I think it was a similar result with Alfonso Soriano, is that you end up with these long-term deals where, hey, the year that they're killing it, right, that they're just amazing, you're really paying like 35, 40 million for that guy.
Right.
And then the back end, you're paying 10, 15, 20 million for a guy who is very, very average. Just a clubhouse guy is what you call him. And you kind of give them a label to justify their value to the team and say, oh, he's a clubhouse guy. That just means that we overpaid you. We're putting you in the roster. Okay. That we're just justifying it to the fan base. But yeah, like I hate 8-year contracts, man. We said it back in November. I was all for it. 5 year, overpay him for 5 years.
Yeah. I think we'd agree on
Pay him 5 years, 150, and let's move on. Not 8 years, 200, but they also know that those last 3 years at 50 million, you may not get that depending on what happens in your first 5. So they try to lock up the big deal today.
Something else that Passan said is that he still thinks the Cubs are going to end up signing a Scott Boras client, which I thought was super interesting. And I figured that has to be Matt Chapman, the third baseman, not Jordan Montgomery and not Nate Snell. Although if it was me personally, I would love to have either one of those pitchers, even though we would have a very lefty heavy rotation.
Yeah.
I'd be okay with that to have great pitchers, right? But I think it's going to be
So
Chapman.
I'm curious on your opinion. I want to ask you this, Mick. So you bring that up. Like, think about if they signed Blake Snell or Jordan Montgomery. So you now have Justin Steele, Snell or Montgomery, Imanaga, right? And then you've still got Kyle Hendricks, Jamison Tyon, who are righties, but then you've got Jordan Wicks, who's a lefty, if he cracks the rotation or comes in at any point. So you could have potentially 3, maybe 4 lefties in that rotation. And I'm not knocking you for saying this by any means. I'm more curious about it. You say like you get lefty heavy. Well, aren't most rotations righty heavy?
Yeah.
So I guess like what's the difference? I'm truly asking like in that kind of situation, like does it
Yeah.
really matter if you're lefty heavy?
It does. Well, see, here's why. When certain matchups, right? You play
It's
teams that,
everybody who hits right-handed.
yeah, think about it.
That's it. Okay.
There's a lot of teams that hit right-handed and would have an advantage, if you had a whole roster starters of lefties, right? You want to kind of have a balance, like but most of your hitters are right-handed.
Yeah.
So, having good right-handed pitching's I think really important, but the lefties kind of balance out. Like there's those teams that have the guys like Ohtani. So you want to have some lefties, but having there would be a huge weakness against certain teams if all you had was left-handers, even if they were all really good left-handers. I would think, right? So I would probably say 2 out of the 5 would be ideal, right?
Well,
But
because you do try to balance it where it's every other day,
yeah,
then you keep the lineups unbalanced. But the other argument of that is the reverse splits and the analytics. And, it got so traditional for so long of righty righty. And then analytics came into the game in a big way. And then you start looking at reverse splits and hey, they actually hit lefties well or whatever. But yeah, I completely get what you're saying.
yeah, I mean, and I mean, you're right though. There's some left-handers that get right-handers out, and I've seen those guys as well. So I mean, it's not like an exact science here. I mean, you may have
Sure.
a guy that gets out, that has like a lot of times you'll see these lefties that are able to throw pitches kind of down and in the right-handers that they have a tough time hitting. Over the course of time as a right-handed batter, when you face lefties, the pitches move towards the plate instead of away. But
Yeah.
there's some guys that are able to kind of change speeds, throw this like really soft change up that's on the outside of the plate that looks like it's going to be down the middle and you swing over it. And then this other pitch that's kind of like cutter, slider, breaking ball type thing that is coming in, middle in, and then ends up down, but you swing over top of it, on top of like 4-seam fastball, velocity and all that stuff. So I don't know. I just don't see this happening, having signed Imanaga, having Steele, having Wicks.
Do you think Wick starts in the rotation?
I would think so. I mean, he did really well last year. But if you went out and signed someone, maybe you move him to the bullpen, although he pitched well enough to be in the starting rotation. So that's something to look into. Plus, I heard Carter Hawkins talking about the Cubs wanting to pay attention to what's going on in the market as far as adding pitching bullpen depth, back end guys, like, who can jump in and be a part of the rotation is important. But I mean, I kind of feel like the rotation's just about set. But you could also do something with the bullpen here. And Neris is one of those guys. Almonte is one of those guys, but nothing that really stands out. It's not like they went out and got Josh Hader, although Neris had a good year last season.
His best year.
Yeah, his best year, right? But it was so good they didn't want to re-sign him. And that kind of leads me to this guy. And I keep hearing from people that I know around the league that there's a reason why the Blue Jays went and took Justin Turner over Matt Chapman, that they feel like the glove's still there, but the bat is digressing or regressing. And then, and so teams are kind of shying away. I could see him being a 1-year guy or a 1 year with an option guy. And because I know the Cubs are way more comfortable with those contracts, but that's not going to make the fan base happy not having Bellinger if that's what happens.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like Cubs fans are all in on Bellinger.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think if I'm talking as a realistic Cubs fan, Ohtani was an amazing idea. And it was exciting that he was even a possibility for the Cubs. And it sounds like the Cubs really did put their best foot forward
Right.
on trying to do it, and the Dodgers just went nuts. And we even said on this channel, Mick, like, hey, what, 600 million was kind of the ceiling?
Yeah.
And if the Cubs didn't sign him, hopefully it was because some other team was just kind of stupid with some money. And that's basically what the Dodgers were, like crazy money.
Yeah. 700 million.
Yes, but and so much of it deferred,
Right. But you're not upset about that. You're going, you know what?
I'm not upset because it was a stupid number.
Right.
And so it's like, all right, I'm cool with that. And to know that it was at least a shot. Soto ended up, as a Yankee with the trade. And so now I think all Cubs fans, and including myself, you kind of look over and you're like, all right, like, yeah, okay, Matt Chapman. But again, it would be like, it feels like Cody Bellinger bust right now for the winter.
Yeah, right.
Because it doesn't appear the Cubs are in on Snell or Montgomery. So it's kind of Chapman and or Bellinger, maybe just one of the two. Because I think if you sign both, you're kind of boxing out a lot of the young guys, right?
Yeah,
like
right.
You're boxing out Morel, maybe Shaw as well. You're boxing out Mervis, Michael Bush. There's a lot of great talent that all of a sudden doesn't have a place to play. And so if that's true from the Blue Jays camp about his bat, it also could end up being a very negative situation, because if you're the guy that gets signed instead of Cody Bellinger and then you don't produce, unfortunately, that's just going to be wrong place, wrong time. And the fan base is going to get pretty pissed off about it.
I could see the fit here with Chapman at third, Dansby at short, Nico at second, all those guys being great defenders and Gold Glovers. Would be an amazing infield. Then if it's just saying that you don't have Bellinger, right? Then you're going to have Happen left. You're going to have Pete Crow Armstrong, Hollywood Pete in center, and then Seiya Suzuki in right. Tachman will play some center field and some outfield, and probably start the year as the guy, but eventually Pete Crow Armstrong or Alexander Canario will end up in that spot, right? And then you got the combo of Michael Bush or Matt Mervis at first, although Bush, just listening to people inside baseball, they say that Bush was really taken away from first base, where he's a good player, to learn to play other positions when the Dodgers went and signed Freddie Freeman. And so the Cubs feel like, hey, he's not perfect there yet, but he's got a ton of potential for that spot. But he can also play third, right? Then you wonder about Christopher Morel. Is he going to get into a spot where you can trust him to play solid defense every day, make good decisions,
Right.
And that's a question. And I still would not be surprised if he doesn't end up getting traded in the right deal to someone else, because someone else may have second base for him where he could just go in there. But at the same time, it's a risk. I mean, the guy did hit 26 big league home runs last year. He hit, another 11 or 12 in AAA, and he wasn't even there long. He's got power, and that's a commodity in the game right now. But looking at all of this, when you take Bellinger out of the Cubs lineup, you put Bellinger there, he becomes the face of the team. He's the third batter in the lineup. He's your best player, plays first, DH, and outfield.
Correct.
You take him out, and all of a sudden it's up to those young guys. Matt Shaw, maybe he comes up. He's been playing third base, and he becomes an option for you, but he hasn't even played a full year of professional baseball. And even though he's a really good player, he's got work to do. Just telling you right now. BJ Murray, who was in the futures game last year, played third pretty much all season in Double-A. He'll go to Triple-A. Great eye, still developing power, but he's definitely a clutch player. But I don't know that he's ready for the big leagues yet. So you're and then you're blocking him with Matt Chapman anyway. I mean, if it's a 2-year deal or something. But who knows guys get hurt, things happen all the time. I mean, it's one of those businesses where nothing's guaranteed.
No, nothing is. It's crazy too how much this game is all about timing, and what kind of happens and when. I mean, Cody Bellinger is such a prime example of the timing piece. This guy was left for dead, and the Cubs did the basically what I call like the 1-year contract lottery, where you just throw some money out there and you hope you get the same guy from 3 or 4 years prior. And for the Cubs last year, that's what happened. But I agree with you. I don't know that, think about the lineup like you were talking about right there. I don't see as Matt Chapman as like a face of the lineup.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like the aura is not around Matt Chapman as like he's a foundational block that's the face of a franchise, where that's the guy going on billboards in Chicago. That's the guy who's on the graphics for ESPN Sunday Night Baseball. That's the guy that the jersey sales are going nuts for. Like, that's not him, right? And that could be Bellinger. And that will be guys like Ohtani and Soto and so forth. But Chapman, it's just not him. And so I agree with you on that and the lineup and how it looks and how it's structured. And I do think that it plays a little bit of a mental psyche with the team. Like if you go out there every single day, you can't tell me that guys, like as much as they're competitors and as much as they support each other and maybe it's a great clubhouse and so forth, like just as a team, you look around and you're like, who's our guy? Like who's the guy? Whose back are we jumping on when we need something?
Right.
And the Cubs, and that's what I'm most scared of with this offseason, is that if you don't get Bellinger, you're relying on Chapman, who I don't think could be that person. No offense to Matt. I don't know him. I have no idea like what he's like at all. I don't keep up with him because he's been on the A's and the Blue Jays. Like I just don't watch Matt Chapman. But the Cubs just don't have that. And they had it last year with Cody. And so I think there's also a comfort and a known presence that you get when you sign him. It's not like signing an outsider who comes in and you have to formulate that chemistry. You sign Cody and it's just plug and play from last year. Plus all these young guys and prospects are a year more developed and a year older and a more seasoned, more confident, all these things. Like you become a more dangerous ball club.
Right.
So,
well, you better be patient. And if you don't sign him, you better be patient because there's going to be a learning curve for the young players. Let's talk about this, Chad. The Cubs announced 19 players yesterday invited to camp, non-roster invitees, right? So I just want to talk about a couple of those guys on that list, right? First off, how about David Bodie? He's getting paid big league money to play in the minor leagues, but
$4 million, is that what it is?
I think it's more than that. I think it was like six or seven, but
okay,
he's been in AAA. It almost felt like he fell out of the manager's office.
I don't know David Bodie at all. Never met him, talked to him, whatever. That guy is living off of his grand slam in the bottom of the ninth from 2018. Like it's one of the greatest highlights of Cubs baseball.
Golden home run.
Yeah, just walking off on a 3-0 deficit to the Nationals and walking off on Sunday Night Baseball at Wrigley with that grand slam. And he's always had like bursts, but he's just never like, I don't know, gotten to that next step. Got him a good contract, good for him. Would be nice if he was truly someone who's serviceable, but I look at all the young talent and then I look at Bodie and I'm like, I'd rather be giving the other guys the opportunity. No offense to David. It's just, I'd rather look and see about, the guys with the upside being somehow on the roster and giving them a shot instead of David Bodie taking up some playing time.
Well, you got Matt Shaw, Chase Strumpf, a
Yep.
couple of infielders that'll be invited as well. We talked about Shaw, last year's #1 pick. Owen
Yep.
Casey, the
Yeah.
the Canadian crusher, as some people called him last year. I not being one of them, but he can crush the ball. And you got a whole host of catchers that are guys from other organizations: Jorge Alfaro, Joe Hudson, and then of course Pablo Aliendo, who's a prospect in the Cubs system, and Bryce Wyndham, who's been in AAA. You know, those guys will get an opportunity. Then with pitching wise, I thought Ethan Roberts, who we saw in the big leagues a couple years ago, dealt with some injuries. Cam Sanders, another high pick by the Cubs and a hard thrower. And then the guy that sticks out to me the most, though, is Carl Edwards Jr., CJ Edwards. I'm so hopeful that the guy that we used to call the string bean slinger is able to be on this team when it's all said and done.
It would be cool, wouldn't it? What a great story that would be. I loved Carl Edwards Jr. You know, he was one of my favorite guys on the Cubs pitching staff back in the day. And somehow, somewhere, something just went wrong, went sideways, and he kind of lost it. And it sucked. But yeah, I really hope that he's able to make that return.
Yeah, I mean, he was one of these guys that I guess he did kind of that leap thing when he pitched, but I remember being at spring training and him having a problem with balking and then having to like kind of rework things and who knows, but been a great
we talked about it.
Yeah.
I think Madden got tossed early in a season because of that. And umpires calling it on him and Madden saying, we talked about this. And, you know, they still called it. And I think Joe got tossed early a couple of times over it.
Yeah. Like, oh, now you guys want to call this.
Yeah.
So spring training, I mean, here we go. What is it? Wednesday is the 14th. And, you know, and that's the pitchers and catchers reporting for the Cubs. Let me make sure I get this right. Yep, it is Wednesday. Valentine's Day. Make sure that you take care of the wife there, Chad. With 3 young kids. You don't want to knock her up.
Don't I was gonna say, don't piss Stephanie off, man. On pitchers and catchers day, okay?
I know. 20 years.
Hey, congrats.
Yep.
You know, quick trivia question for everyone.
Yeah.
Quick trivia question for everyone. I caught Stephanie's garter at the wedding. Or at the reception, I guess. Would have been a little weird at the wedding.
All the facts I didn't know. I forgot about that. The young guy.
Yeah, young
full of life and vigor. Well, it's now it's the day that we report to spring training. And when do you think some of these Scott Boras guys are going to sign? I mean, I think they all go at the same time, right? I think that it'll happen. It'll be like 48 hours. They'll all be gone.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. Like once the first domino falls. But then the only thing I've said against that idea is you got 2 position players and 2 pitchers, you know? So does that change something? I could definitely see like, hey, Bellinger signs, so then Chapman immediately goes or vice versa. Right. But I don't know that what they do necessarily impacts Snell and Montgomery immediately.
Yeah.
That would be my only thing. But I agree with you because these guys also, I mean, at some point, you get really close to the season and somebody's got to blink. So I don't know.
I just feel like Jordan Montgomery is going back to the Rangers, right? I mean, you have to bring him back there. I think Blake Snell ends up with the Yankees. I mean, they love, you know, guys like him, 2-time Cy Young Award winner. They would love to have an ace pitcher on that staff, you know, and someone that's the kind of guy that just fits there. Bellinger with the Cubs, although I don't think it's the Blue Jays. I think it's the Angels that are going to be the team that'll overpay for him. Just based on, I could see it happening, although maybe they won't. I mean, you know, who knows? But that would be the team that I could see going, okay, even though we're going to be paying for a guy that's not going to do anything for the final 3 years of this contract, probably we'll do it just to keep him away from someone else.
Yeah.
And then Chapman, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Maybe the Giants. I don't know. Unless Bellinger goes somewhere else, then maybe the Cubs end up with him. But I just think that it's telling that the Blue Jays went with Turner instead of him when he played there all last year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I keep like, it's so weird too that the off season's kind of like centered now on 4 guys, right? Like it's just come down to these 4 and what happens and all the speculation. But I don't know that, like you were talking about earlier, I didn't know that, but and if Blue Jays like using Justin Turner, which I really like Justin Turner. I
Right.
think you said that too, right? Like you're a big fan of his and just
Yeah,
kind
I
of how he
like it.
plays the
Yeah.
game.
I like his
Yeah.
long beard.
Yeah. It's just sorry, I'm in a construction zone.
Yeah.
So you hear the knocking. But no, I don't know, man. I keep looking back at it and thinking about just what this offseason, we said it before, like what it's going to look like, depending on what does or doesn't happen in these final couple of weeks. Do you really think also this has come up, but are we, or are the Cubs looking at this going, hey, we got to be prepared for next year? Because we've talked about like the free agency class, um, and do you spend now or spend later or spend both?
Yeah. When you said that last time, the comment sections blew up, man. People were like, "What is he talking about?" No. Look,
But
here's what I think. And it's a great, you make a great point based on the fact that we're being held up right now by 4 good players. But this isn't elite prospect, elite type guys, like Juan Soto's. You know what I'm saying? Like this isn't. These are good players. Bellinger had the 2 bad years. Blake Snell has the injury issue. Jordan Montgomery has been up and down. It's not like he has this solid track record. Chapman's been trending in this direction. I'm just being honest. That's throwing it out there for you guys, and that's just me giving my take on this. Now, I like Bellinger the best out of that group, but I wouldn't put my house on the line and say, I'm guaranteeing that this guy's going to be good in 5 years. And I've said that too.
Yeah.
But with all of that put out there, next year the market's a lot bigger. And there are players that you would probably say, hey, you know what, I could do this for the right gamble here. But the issue is if I'm Tom Ricketts, I own the Cubs. And and I've said it, I like Jed Hoyer. I do. I like him as a person. I like the direction that the organization is going in a lot of areas. But if I'm Tom Ricketts and the Cubs don't make the playoffs next year, I'm having a serious conversation with the people that I trust about leadership. Should have made the playoffs last year, didn't do it, right? Got rid of the manager.
Yeah.
This year coming in, the Brewers are throwing away their best players, including their Cy Young pitcher. Their other guys hurt, right?
Yep.
The Cardinals went in on some pitchers, but they're all kind of just like they could end up being a surprise team, right? They got some pitching, but not anything that scares you, right? You look at the Reds. The Reds, they're kind of like they were last year. That they could, if they put together, they're young, they got some talent, but you should be able to compete with them. The Pirates are the Pirates, right?
Yeah.
You don't make the playoffs and you're Jed Hoyer, there's some nervous times there because at the end of the day, it's about winning and it's about winning now and keep saying the next year and the next year and the next year. It just doesn't fly. Tom Ricketts has said from the beginning that he doesn't want to give up seasons. No. I mean, I've heard him say it before, so but he's not also pulling the Jerry Jones where he's in there making decisions. He's trusting the people that he hires to do that. So that's why I think there's a little bit that's what I'm saying. If they don't win, then it could put some pressure on that front office.
A lot. They don't want to be the wait till next year crew anymore. That's the last thing this franchise wants. And they shouldn't be with this brand and the market and just everything they got going for it. There's no reason the Cubs shouldn't be, constant contenders. And I look at the Red Sox, look at their run over the last 20 years, World Series, right? And they were in the ALCS, lost in 7 with Aaron Boone's homer, then won the World Series the next year. Then they were competitive, won the World Series again. I think it was in '08, maybe. So they won it again. Then they had a couple of years where they sucked. Remember Bobby Valentine coached the Red Sox? Remember that? Like for a
Yeah.
year? Yeah,
Yeah.
remember that? Like they had a year or two where they would just suck, and then they come back and they have John Farrell, and they end up winning another World Series. Like the Red Sox have had that where it's, hey, we're pretty much over 20 years. We're a really, really good franchise and a good baseball team. Did we have like 4 or 5 seasons out of the 20 where it sucked? Yeah, we did, and it happens. But over the course of that 20, pretty darn good baseball team, you know? And so that's where the Cubs need to be.
Right.
It's just, there's no reason they shouldn't be. It's just that constant contender. And if it's a down year where they finish 4th or 5th in the division, even 3rd in the division, that should be the one-off year, not the, oh my God, we just happened to be in the pennant race this year. Like they should be that club that it's always them leading the pack. And I tell you, the Brewers have tried to bolster up a little bit. The Cardinals are always the Cardinals. The Reds are
Right.
young, they're annoying. The Pirates, whatever. But that Brewers team, again, could be a little bit of a problem in the Central. I know they got rid of Corbin Burns and some other things, and obviously they don't have counsel, but they could still be a problem.
Final thing, Chad, before we get off here, switching gears to the White Sox. And I find this comical. After the city didn't want to help the Cubs renovate Wrigley, right? And you remember that whole thing. Tom Ricketts went out and found the financing himself to rebuild Wrigley Field, which is the top tourist destination in the entire state, right? And now the White Sox, who own, I think they still owe like $50 million, or the taxpayers owe that on the old stadium, think that the state's going to build them in the city with everything else going on in the city, this stadium right here, which would be awesome, by the way. But it really is comical that they think that, and knowing the politics there, they probably will end up building this stadium, after they didn't help the Cubs at all.
Yeah, right.
But it's just, it makes absolutely zero sense to me to go in and build a new stadium when the White Sox stadium they have right now might not be in the prime spot. I mean, I know a couple people got shot there last year. This thing looks awesome, but so go find the money yourself, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Look at that. We could boat right up there.
I know. It looks badass, man. It looks awesome. But the problem is that franchise sucks. Like nobody likes that franchise. It's terrible. Like when you say Chicago, nobody goes White Sox. Everybody goes Cubs. Like the Cubs are Chicago. I know the White Sox have obviously a really long history, and they won a World Series in '05 and all these things, whatever. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. That to me, it's like, man, what else could the Cubs take jabs on? They get shafted on the All-Star game all the time, right? And that's such a BS excuse about the security. Then they talk about, hey, we're not gonna help you with renovation, and then they're dealing with the whole Friday crap on your start times, like can't have Friday night games and all this other stuff. Yeah, just like it's a constant battle. And this is one of your best like attractions, money makers, things the city should be proud of. And it feels, obviously we're not in those meetings, but it feels like a fight every time. Then the White Sox come up and they're like, yeah, we may just move. We may just leave.
Right.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
For yet.
Right. Wait a minute. Well, what about a new stadium? What about putting something nice together instead of that dump on the south side? I don't know. I look at it too. Chicago is another thing with it. And I don't know. I've been to New York. I've been to LA, been to Chicago. Like, I don't know. Like they don't have 2 of anything else, but they have 2 baseball teams.
Right.
LA has 2 baseball teams, 2 football teams, 2 hockey teams. Like they have a lot of 2s, right? New York, same thing. They got NBA teams, and
Right.
LA's got 2 NBA teams.
Yeah.
New York, same thing. Chicago only has 2 baseball teams, right? Like they don't have a second hockey team. It's only the Hawks.
Right.
It's only the Bulls. It's only the Bears.
Yeah.
So where do the White Sox even come in? Like it just,
Move
I
them
don't
to
know.
Charlotte, where their AAA affiliate is. Right. They go down
Yeah,
there, their new
yeah,
stadium,
it'd be
waterfront.
great. Come to Nashville. Yeah,
Yeah. No. That's an expansion. Going to be expanding there. No,
I
I don't know.
believe that.
It looks really cool, but at the same time, it's like, how do you go and think that the city's going to pay for this and the state's going to pay for this and taxpayers are going to pay for this when you still owe money on your other stadium? And, and on top of it, you, get that out of there. And you already owe money on your other stadium, and you didn't help the number one attraction in the entire
Yeah,
state when they needed it. It was like some tax breaks maybe, but all they were so broke then, and now all of a sudden it's like they got to figure out what they're doing with the Bears to me before
yeah.
they worry about um, the White Sox. All right, well look, this was fun. We got
Always.
together for our Friendly Confines weekly show. Missed last week because I was in Key West and I had the worst internet. People, I saw some of you guys get on these message boards, and you have been so complimentary of what we do here, and I can't tell you how much that means. It's great when people send me like screenshots of like, hey, they're talking about you here, and you guys are saying, hey, we like what's going on. But thank you. But somebody was like, but they've got to fix they've got some issues, like some streaming.
You
The
do you have
streaming
that?
issues were it was
You had that that
fiber
AOL.
optics.
You had the AOL fax machine dial up down
That
there.
was
Is that what you?
terrible.
Is that what you're working on?
It
Yeah.
was awful. So I do apologize for that, friends. What I do want to do, though, a couple things before we wrap it up. I want to remind you that the show and the channel are presented by the Tennessee Smokies. Their team store, smokiesbaseball.com/store. You can go on there and get some great gear. They've got hats and jerseys and autograph gear and championship gear from the AA championship. Some of the great prospects that are going to be in the big leagues starring soon: Pete Crow Armstrong, Owen Casey, Matt Shaw, Cade Horton. All of those guys have just been there. So they're in card sets, and some of them have autographed stuff. So check it out.
Nice.
And also don't forget about this guy here, Chadwick Anderson.
Catfish mortgage, right? That's what we're going with. Yeah. No, the 2024, it's weird. January 1st hit, and all of a sudden everybody wanted to talk mortgages again, which was kind of crazy. But things have really taken off in the first 6 weeks of the new year. So appreciate everybody who's reached out. Some of you have. We actually closed our second person from the channel today, and appreciate them. Yeah, it's been great. Like we've helped out some people already, and then there are other families we've helped save, hundreds, and then one family even thousands of dollars per month. The other cool thing is we don't get beat on interest rate, and I know that sounds cliche, but guess what? I'm the owner, so we don't get beat on interest rates. Kind of nice. But anyway, there's my information. If you just want to ask questions too, like it doesn't have to be a mortgage. If you just want to ask questions, that is literally my personal cell and email there. Scan the QR code. You'll get some credits and benefits at closing if we do a transaction together. But appreciate you guys because it's been fun to be here with Mick. And then you guys reaching out like Mick was talking about with the message boards and stuff. It gives us energy and makes it worth doing and even that much more fun.
People are like, they don't scream on there. And I'm like, well, we do sometimes.
Season hasn't started yet.
Just wait. Give us time.
Yeah, not October yet.
Yeah. You helped me get into my house and my studio. And I said this many times. I couldn't have done it without you. And it's turned out to be an excellent investment, something that I'm very proud of. So people can definitely trust you, Chad, or they can just call you Catfish when they
either one.
All right. That does it for the show, guys. We'll be back again tomorrow, but this is our long form show. We do this we're going to try to do this every Saturday, except when I'm in Key West, which is not going to be until next year. So Thanks for hanging out with us, and go Cubs. Get in that comment section, like and subscribe, thumbs up.